All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Contract Wednesday. Today we are going to cover the Form 28, which is the purchase and sale agreement for condo units. And we'll go over it in pretty good detail, but a lot of the clauses are common between Form 21 for single families and Form 28 for condos. So if you want greater detail on things like earnest money and computation of time and those sorts of things, feel free to watch that video as well, and maybe you already have. So with that, we'll go ahead and dive into Form 28 and get this thing started. All right, so on your screen you'll see we have Form 28, Condo Purchase and Sale Agreement, revision July 2015. So this is the most current version of this form, and you want to make sure that you're always using the most current versions. In fact, if you use Transaction Desk, by default it will give you the current one, so make sure you're doing that. And this form is laid out much like Form 21 in that it is a summary of the terms on the first page, and then on the subsequent pages it's the definitions, which is a little bit reverse of the most common contracts you'll see outside of real estate, because they tend to put the definitions on the first page and then elaborate on the terms throughout the body of the agreement. So this makes it easier for home owners and buyers, because most of them are not going to read pages 4 through 5. But you guys should, because anytime you're asking a client to sign something, I want to make sure that you yourself have read it. And that's the purpose of this video. So I'm glad you're spending time with me today to do this. So we're just going to go field by field on the first page and make sure that everyone understands what each field is asking for, and also what sort of leverage points you may have in a negotiation when filling them out. Again, if you use Transaction Desk, it'll auto-populate a lot of the fields, but we'll treat this training as if none of them are auto-populated. So obviously, the date of the agreement is the date you've written it. It's not critical that it also be signed on that date. This is just the date you wrote it. MLS number, if it's on market, you'll be able to get that from the listing. And then offer expiration. If you're using Transaction Desk, you can put a date in here. By default, it will be 9 p.m. So if you want your offer to expire at a different time, maybe there's a review period that ends at noon, and you want your offer to expire at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m., you would have to edit and type that onto the agreement separately, because it won't be able to populate a date field. So you have to add that text. Buyer names, that's an easy one because you're representing the buyer. You'll know their names. This field here for status is probably one of the most often missed. And I should tell you that the smartest thing you can do, and I learned this a long time ago, is use your tab button. The most best way to make sure you never skip a field is to just tab through the fields. The people that design software make sure that those, every time you hit tab, it advances in a logical way, and it causes you to look at and consider each field. So even if you're going to leave it blank, you should be looking at it. And in most instances, you're never going to leave them blank. You're going to put in none or not applicable or something like that. So by using the tab button, I can get to this drop down and I can choose one of the statuses that are in the drop down. And the most common ones you're going to use are a married person, an unmarried person, or a married person as their separate property, which means they're married but the other spouse is not involved in the transaction. Seller's name you'll get from public records. Even if it says undisclosed in the listing, you should look at the public records and list the seller's name as it reads there in the public records. Tax parcel number. Every condo unit has one. It can be a little trickier to find them when you're searching county records, but it should be in the listing, so you can grab it there. County, that's an easy one. Unit number, if that's applicable. Some condos have separate addresses, so the unit number will be blank, but for the most part, they'll have a unit number. Condominium name, and then address. If the unit comes with a parking space, it'll be listed in the listing. Sometimes you may find that the listing agent didn't put it in there, but you'll see it in the legal description, and that's a good thing. That means it has a deeded parking space. That means when they sell that property, the space goes with it, and that's pretty cool, because then your client doesn't have to fight for a place to park at night, right? Storage space number, if they have a bank of storage spaces, you'll get a number for it. A lot of condos, it'll just be on the back deck or inside the unit or in the garage. But if there's a number, you'll put it. This next one is one where a lot of people aren't sure how to fill it out. So you have three choices here: declaration recording number and then a space to put the recording number, declaration recording number and then a place to attach the recording number, or there is no recording number, and so you have to use MLS form number 29. That would be, that last one would be if it's a brand new complex and they have not yet recorded it. Most of the condos you're going to sell have been recorded and the recording number is known or available. You may not always know what they are, but if you're writing an offer, check this box, leave the field blank, and let the listing broker fill in the recording number. They can get it off their resale certificate, they can get it off public records, and so could you. But if you aren't able to find it, just check that box and leave it blank, and then it'll get added. Item 5, the appliances. This is a good one, because the posture you want to have about appliances is you want as many as you can get, but you also want to recognize that it impacts the negotiations. If it's a competitive climate and there's multiple offers and I'm asking for everything in the sun and John isn't, they might choose John's offer over mine because they wanted to keep the washer and dryer. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't ask, but recognize the environment you're in, and is it competitive, and is this going to weaken or strengthen my offer, and so on. Absent of those competitive influences, the posture you should have is you should ask for everything you saw in the unit. If you don't remember what you saw, you can go look at the photos in the listing. Failing that, you can just put what the listing broker put in the listing as coming with the house or with the condo. But recognize that that might not be everything, and you don't want to have your client go, well, wait, we closed, but they stole the microwave. Well, that's because we didn't ask for the microwave. Well, why didn't you ask for the microwave? We wanted that microwave, right? So recognize and discuss the appliances. Don't take it lightly, because people get pretty fired up about it when they move in and can't cook, right? So enough about that, but don't take filling these little boxes out lightly, right? Purchase price, you're going to put a numerical amount here, and then you're going to put the typed out amount here. If you use Transaction Desk, it will do it for you, but you treat this just like you do a checkbook, right? You write in the number and then you write out the number. That's how these work. And if you're lazy like I am, or I should say efficient, use Transaction Desk so that you don't have to type. Earnest money. So earnest money is, it's A, required. You have to have it. You don't have a binding contract without it. B, it's a statement to the seller of how serious your client is. So make sure that you're not allowing your client to make a weak statement. I see all the time where someone puts $500, and the answer had better be that's all they have. Otherwise, you need to put bigger earnest money down. The rule of thumb is 1 to 3% in this market. Can you put more? Absolutely. Make sure that your client understands the risks. Make sure you have contingencies. Make sure you never lose an earnest money. But you're making a statement to the seller about how serious you are. All right. Most commonly, you're going to put a check as the form of the earnest money, and you're always going to put to be held by the closing agent.
So if we check, but later on we wire the earnest money, would that matter?
You should do an addendum that says we did it differently than what we had indicated. Yeah. Don't put check if it's not going to be a check. Ask your clients these questions, right? That's where this happens most commonly, is when you just didn't talk about it and you assume. But like Janice your clients most commonly
use wire, but
are going to do this.
Yeah.
Right?
But my question is, we put wire, but we give a check, or we put a check and then they wire.
Yeah. You are in breach of contract. Is someone going to sue you or try and get out of the contract because your client failed to comply with the terms of the contract? Probably not. But we're professionals here. We're thorough. We do not leave openings for the other side to quit and get out of the deal, right? So do an addendum if you ever do something different than what was in the agreement. It's the same logic as that addendum we use when the earnest money is late, where we say buyer and seller acknowledge that earnest money was delivered late, but both agree to proceed to closing. That is tying up an opening for someone to get out of the deal. By tightening that back up again, they can't get out of the deal anymore. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So this is sort of along those same lines. All right.
So the check has to be a certified check or personal check?
No, that's not true, and not.
The check has to be personal. Could be personal check. Or
yeah, I'm going to say the question so the recording picks it up. Ashley's asking, does it have to be certified? The answer is no. Okay. Can it be? Sure. Does it have to be? No. Now, there are occasions, since we have the topic raised, that if your earnest money is being deposited the day before closing, it's so late that you're now getting up next to and close to the actual closing date, that should be certified funds, because a personal check they'd have to hold for 10 days. You don't want to do that. Okay. On to specific term number 8, default. So this means, what if the buyer fails to close without a legal reason to get out of the deal? What is the seller's remedy? We want to always check forfeiture of earnest money. If you check the second box, you give the seller the opportunity to sue your client. Don't do that. The agreement that all parties will have signed in this agreement will be that we are all agreeing that damages are hard to quantify. So we're going to agree up front that liquidated damages are going to simply be the earnest money. That's what checking that box does, and that's what you want, because you want to limit your client's downside risk to just losing the earnest money. Does that make sense? All right. Title. So our preferred title company is Next Title. Our preferred escrow company is Next Title. So you should list them in both of these, just like that. Now, in a competitive market like we're in right now, do I want Next Title to get the business? Yeah. But do I want to lose the house if Next Title can't get the business? No way. Right? So I am, in most cases, going to put whoever the listing broker asked for in the listing remarks. So First American, Chicago, whatever, right? But absent of a crazy climate like this, or absent of competition like that, if it's a home that's been on the market for 80 days, I'm going to put Next Title in, because I want my preferred provider to get the business, because they take care of me better than the other title companies. Make sense? All right. So don't lose the house over it, but definitely steer the business to them when you can. Closing date. So we're all pretty clear on what that means. The one comment I would make is be very planful about it. Don't take it lightly. A lot of agents go, oh, today's the 25th, 30 days, June 25th. And who knows, June 25th might be a Saturday, right? Be planful about it. Look at a calendar. Decide with your lender if it's financed. Whoever just logged in, if you could mute yourself, that would be awesome. We're recording this. Thank you. So pick a date that makes sense, and then set that date in conjunction with a conversation with your lender, right? Some lenders are telling you, oh man, they're on USDA loan product. That takes 60 days or whatever. Think about it and put a date that you can stick to, because asking for an extension is a point of weakness. Right, John? I'm not picking on John. We've all been there, right? You got to go get an extension. The seller wants something for that almost every time. If you can get an extension without having to pay a nickel, that's awesome. So you're going to pick your closing date, and then possession date most often is going to be upon closing. If you're negotiating a post-closing rent back, maybe the seller needs to stick around for a few days, you could go over here and you could say closing plus 3, right? So that would be 9 p.m. on the third day after closing. Or you could say C Form 65B or C Form 34. 65B is the rental agreement itself. Form 34, you could say, hey, we're going to enter into a rental agreement. Seller's going to remain for a month after. The bit of advice I would give you if you're ever doing those sorts of things is make sure that there's an incentive for the seller who has now become a tenant to get out. So make sure you put in their language that says, yeah, they get to stay until June 25th. For every day after June 25th they remain, it's $200 a day, or it's $800 a day, or whatever. But make it an incentive to get out on time. Right? All right. Specific term number 12, services of a closing agent for payment of utilities. 22K. This is one that a lot of agents take lightly, and it isn't that it's like this massive burdensome thing, but you always want to be planful about any terms you put into an agreement. And 22K is something that benefits both buyer and seller, but it could be viewed by the seller as an impediment. It means escrow is going to hold back more money to make sure they have enough and then give them a check later for the difference. That might frustrate the seller. So in a competitive climate, I'm not saying you should do this every time, but think about it. Ask the listing broker when you make that pre-offer phone call. Hey, how do you feel about 22K? Do you care if we let escrow handle that stuff, or is your client going to feel like that's a pain? And then do what they ask. Either way, your client needs to make a phone call to the utilities anyway and make sure they know that they're moving in and taking over. But 22K is what makes it easy on everybody, but you just never know if the seller might feel like that's a burden. Specific term number 13, charges and assessments levied before but due after closing. Everybody checks this one, and in most cases they get countered with checking this one. And the irony is you are doing that in a place where there may not be any assessments. So don't make your offer weaker without knowing that, yeah, I in fact need this because there is something to worry about. So what does that mean? Well, on a condo, it means a lot, right? This is Form 28. So the probability of an assessment is much higher on a condo than it is in a house. But it's not zero on a house either. So you got to ask, right? Example for a detached single family might be King County Health Department, the sewer capacity charge. So just know, right? Don't take for granted that these things are meaningless or insignificant, because they're not. You know, if you check this box, I just had a deal, it blew up. I didn't check this box, but it blew up over the assessment. Had I checked that box, seller would have accepted my offer readily, and my client would have been stuck with a $30,000 assessment. That would be bad, right? We sell lots of condos that are foreclosures. Almost every one of them has an assessment. That's why it went to foreclosure. The owner said, screw it, and walked away. And now we're marketing a house with a big 5-figure assessment. And are we hoping there's a buyer's agent who's not smart enough to ask the question? You betcha. These are banks, man. They don't feel guilt. They just hope somebody does the math wrong and pays too much. So don't let that happen to you. Specific term 14, citizenship. Now the MLS has added this, and they've given you the flexibility that it should be left blank by us as buyer's agents. So you would write your offer and leave this blank, and the seller will check the box in their response, and that is not considered a counter. So you know how in most cases any alteration is considered a counter? Specifically set aside by the MLS to say, nope, in this instance, we don't expect the buyer to know the nationality of the seller, And so when the seller responds, that's not a counter, so the mutual date is not affected.
So if the seller later on check that box, does the buyer have to initial it?
Nope. They just check it. We had one just yesterday where the hedge fund that we're selling all these houses for, they didn't check it. We forgot to tell them, and so we had to check it. And it's not a big deal. It doesn't have to be initialed by anybody.
When you do the declaration and you check the box, but you don't know the number when that comes back, do they have to initial that?
Nope. No. All right. Line 5, specific term 15, new construction. It either is or is not new construction, right? So do you recognize this Form 29 reference right here? It's the same one as up here, right? So you're going to say is not for the vast majority of these condos because the declaration has been filed, the condo association has been set up, everything is done. Even though it might be brand new, it's all done. If it hasn't been done, which is certainly possible, so this would be like pre-sales for condos. You know how a lot of these high-rise condos in downtown Seattle, they started selling them a year ago, right? In those instances, they're going to check the Form 29 part because that form is going to lay out, okay, so what's going to happen next? Instead of a resale cert, there's a public offering statement. There's some nuanced stuff to a building that is sort of coming out versus one that's already established. Which is a good segue to specific term 16, public offering statement or resale cert. So again, if it's a brand new building, you might have a public offering statement, but in most cases, it's a resale cert. And you don't have to know which one necessarily on this term because it's telling you whichever is applicable. If they attach the resale cert to the listing, you can mark it as received, but make darn sure that you've reviewed the entire resale cert because in a lot of cases, in fact, most of the ones I've seen, they have not attached the entire resale cert. So make sure that you got everything. Otherwise, check, they're going to give it to me within some period of time. Okay? And I like 5. Well, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you get it. All right? Condo assessment. Now, the typical setup for a condo association account, when I buy a condo, they have to set up the account in my name, and they collect reserves. So they want to seed that account with a couple months worth of dues. So in the first field, you're going to put whatever the dues are that are in the listing. In the second field, you're going to always put 2 months. If for some reason that association asks for more, then the seller will counter back and you'll initial it and then you'll be done. But the assumption is 2 months of whatever the monthly dues are. And don't let the word assessment throw you off. Homeowners' dues are technically a monthly assessment. Make sense? Agency disclosure. So this is where you disclose who represents whom, and you're going to always represent the buyer if you're on the buyer side, and they're going to represent the seller if they're on the listing side. And that's pretty easy. Line 19 is your list of addenda. The strategy you want to have here is you want this list to be as short as possible. The longer it is, the more onerous your offer seems to the seller and the listing broker. So the shorter, the fewer contingencies you can have, the better. The other thing about this is you want to list them in alphanumeric order. So if I'm doing 22A, D, J, and K, and an inspection, this would be the order that they would be in.
How about those forms we could not find from the drop-down list, for example, 65B? So we just type it.
You type it down here, form 65B. So Janice's question was, what if the form is not in the drop-down? Because this is not an all-inclusive list, right?
Mm-hmm.
John?
Sometimes on that line where you type in, I like to put like legal exhibit A, just so it,
You don't like to, you have to.
oh, you have to.
Your
It says
firm,
it up, well, I don't know about, but on this form, but on that. on that one,
let me add that to the video because it's a great observation. If you don't put these words on your offer in this location, you have a voidable contract.
Wow, really? I didn't know that.
So if you're licensed less than 2 years and you're writing your first couple offers, that's the most common first thing I say back to people is make sure you add this, and that is a very important piece. So,
I like it because it's obvious, but
Yeah.
but I didn't realize it's voidable. That's good to know.
so you want to have it listed as an attachment. Sometimes you'll have, unique to the listing firm disclosures. Like Coldwell Banker has a lot of them. Windermere has some of them, and you have to list those. I look at offers with people where they've got the addenda in the offer, but they haven't listed it here. That negates any value of that addendum, even if it's signed by everybody. If it's not made an addendum to this purchase and sale agreement, it doesn't apply to this transaction. So you have to make sure you list those, right? Bank addenda, any addenda has to be on this list, right? Great question. All right, scrolling down below the customer contact info, you don't want anybody calling your client, right? So I don't put customer contact info on there. I don't put their email. I don't put their phone, and neither should you. Okay.
That's good to know. Not their address either, or
Nope.
So email, phone, don't put them.
No.
Wow.
No, because
How about address?
Nope, I don't put any of that.
But sometimes, last time when I wrote up a commercial offer, I leave those blank, and they ask me to put those information in, so they would have more confidence to my client.
No problem. So Jan, I'll just repeat it for the recording. Janice said on a commercial deal, the seller said we want the contact info for the buyer to give us confidence. That's the beauty is whenever someone says we need that information, my response is always, why? What do you need it for? And they don't have a reason. Giving them confidence? Did you not put proof of funds in your
We did.
offer?
We did.
Yeah, okay.
That commercial deal we took a long time.
Right. It's up to you to decide.
So it's not. They certainly cannot put those information, even they ask. We just say.
Yeah, but you just have to decide. Is that listing broker ignorant enough to have your not putting that in impact your client? Because then you should put it in. But that's a statement about the level of intelligence of the other side. You have to listen and react to what they're asking for, right? When I say, what do you need it for? I don't say it with teeth.
Yeah.
I say, oh yeah, I'm not in the habit of providing that, but what does your client need that for? And they go, oh, it just makes them feel more comfortable. Okay, well, we've written the offer, we've got the earnest money check, and you've got their pre-approval. Is there fear that they're not real? Because I'm not sure I'm understanding why that information makes some big difference here. If he digs his heels in, yeah, I'm going to provide it. Because he's demonstrating ignorance, right? But you have to be smart about it. Handle objections, right? What did Grant Cardone says? Most objections are not objections; they're just complaints. So don't handle them like an objection.
So, like, let's suppose on the seller side, and you haven't gotten that yet. I'm going ahead here. So you put in the seller's name, but you don't know anything. You don't know their address. Right. Well, I guess you get the phone number sometimes. That will get populated in there too. But if they come back and they write stuff in there, they put in the address, they put in there.
If the seller does?
Yeah, if the agent does that for whatever reason, that you don't have to initial up on that kind of stuff, do you?
No.
Okay.
So back to the contact info, though.
Yes.
Make sure if you're not using Transaction Desk, make sure that you use the proper firm name. I've seen agents do this, and that is not the name of your firm for contract purposes. That's why you are firm 3083. So just make sure you get that right. Most people do, but not everybody, and so I want to make sure they do. And then these are new fields, which is the addition of your license number and the firm's license number. So if you don't know your license number, go to dol.wa.gov and look it up. Any questions before we move on to the other terms? John?
Like at the top here, when you put in like, it has
Here?
a unit number, I think, yeah. Property tax parcel numbers right there, see that?
Yep.
So like with the 21, you got the tax parcels and you have an address, but here you got a unit number. Can you use this one form? Could you put like, if you were going to buy a condo, this one, it was going to buy like 3 of them right in a row. Could you just put them all on this one form and just say, see Exhibit A and then type all that out in there?
Sure.
Awesome.
You can put more than one property on a purchase and sale agreement. You got to make sure you list them in the address section, and you got to make sure you have a legal description for each one.
Mm-hmm.
We actually literally covered this yesterday.
Okay.
Dawn had a deal where it's a building on a parcel, and the guy owns the 2 neighboring parcels, and she wants to put them all on one agreement, which you absolutely can.
Okay.
All right. So Form 28. Now we're going to talk about the definitions. And I've covered these pages in great detail in the Form 21 recording. So I'm going to skim these a little more, but I will slow down on the ones that are unique to condos. But if you want greater detail, watch the Form 21 recording. It's long, but I go into like really minute details. Okay, so the short version of the first paragraph is your client is paying cash unless the rest of the agreement says something to the contrary. So a lot of agents think that they have to put a 22A in or write cash somewhere in the agreement. Technically, you don't. This first paragraph says that this is cash unless you have a financing addendum. Now, having said that, a lot of listing brokers don't know this. They've never read this agreement, but you guys have, so that's awesome. So having said that, I would still put elsewhere in the offer, this is a cash offer. Either Form 22D paragraph 11, that blank paragraph, or Form 34, or you can even put it right here. Right? If I did 500,000, I could spell all cash at closing, right? Or something like that. All right.
I've seen on like the commercial ones, sometimes I've seen it construed this way. They tell cash at closing, but they have they've got their cash plus they're getting the cash from the loan.
Right.
And they're not carrying the contract.
That is considered cash at closing. So you could say it's all cash at closing and still have a financing addendum. If I say all cash at closing with no financing addendum, that means I am using cash. Plus, I'm going to provide proof of funds, so they're going to see that I have a bank account with $500,000 in it. All right?
Okay.
Earnest money. This is one that has changed in July of 2015, and a lot of people aren't aware of it, so I'm going to cover it very clearly for everyone's benefit. It used to be you have up to 3 days to deposit it. Now you have 2 days unless they give it to you. So it's 2 days if it goes straight to escrow or if it's going to be deposited into the brokerage's trust account and they give it to you, it's 2 days. Right? We don't have a trust account, so that second one will never happen. But they have 2 days to get it to escrow unless they give it to you, the agent, at which point you have 3 days. So if I get mutualed on Monday, I have till Wednesday to deposit it directly myself. But if I give it to Janice on Tuesday, I now have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to get it deposited, right? If I give it to Janice on Wednesday, I actually have until the following Monday, because the 3 days starts when I give it to Janice. Does that make sense? So you have between 2 and 5 days, depending on when they hand it to you, because in most cases they are handing it to you. It's actually best that they hand it to you because you got more time, right? So if you do that, if it gets deposited within 2 days, for your file to pass QC so that you can get paid straight out of escrow, if it's deposited within 2 days, you don't have to do anything. You've complied with this paragraph. If it gets deposited on the 3rd day, 4th day, or 5th day, we're going to ask you for a Form 89, which is a receipt of earnest money. All that does for us is establish that they handed it to you. The cool thing is that's the easiest form on the planet to get because it's only signed by you. It's not even signed by your client, right? So if it's deposited on day 1 or 2, nothing is needed. Day 3, 4, or 5, a Form 89 is needed. Day 6 and beyond, and that's when you need that addendum that I mentioned earlier where everyone acknowledges it was deposited late, but they're still going to proceed to closing. So does that make sense to everybody? Because it's not super complicated, but it is a difference from what it was before, and you got to kind of go some different directions depending on when it gets deposited.
And it doesn't matter how much it earns.
Right. The number, the language in here about over 10 grand is whether it goes into an interest-bearing account or not. And escrow will handle that because they have to. Were you going to ask something, John?
I was just going to add that, but in some weird circumstances, which we have coming up in your example, this Monday is a holiday, so then you even get one more day, Tuesday, without having to go to the addendum, but you can still use that, was it 69 or something? What form?
89.
Form 89, yeah. And we're going to cover computation of time, but you're exactly right. Weekends and holidays. All right. Included items, we talked about that enough, I think, for specific term number 5. Just be planful about it and make sure you're asking for what you and your client wants. Condition of title. This is where this is really where I get the comfort that I don't often need a Form 22T because they have to deliver marketable title to me, period. I had a conversation with an agent just yesterday, and she was really upset that the seller struck the 22T and gave them a preliminary title report, which, if you think about it, that's a pretty savvy move. Hey, we don't need this contingency. Here it is. Look it over. You got 3 days with Form 17. You got an inspection. You got all these things. If you don't like it, right? 22T doesn't even allow you to terminate anyway. What it does allow you to do is raise a concern, and if the seller can't address your concern, then you can terminate. So it's not a great contingency anyway.
Let's say there is an easement for this property. Can you terminate if you don't like it?
Yeah.
Based
But
on 22T?
you have to first give the seller. We're going to cover this in the 22T video, but I'll give you the short version. You find there's an easement you don't like. You have to make the seller aware of it. Seller has to have the opportunity to try and solve it for you, and if they can't, then you can terminate.
Okay.
So there's just steps involved. So again, I'm not that worried, right? But they're going to give me marketable title, right? Paragraph E, title insurance. This is where the seller, by signing, has already authorized us to get a title report at his expense. That's why on 22D, you don't check standard or extended because you already have this. And this is less expensive than the ones that are in 22D. Now, could your client say, but I want a survey? Sure. Then you should mark extended on 22D and prepare to be countered, because the seller, if he's smart, he's going to realize, oh, that's a $2,000 title report, and it takes a month.
So So the only difference between the standard and extended is the survey. What else?
It's greater coverage.
When you say great coverage,
We're going to cover that in another video. Right? Thank you. I'm trying to keep from going on too many tangents. All right, closing and possession. This basically outlines what the seller has to do, what they have to deliver, and by when. And as you guys already know or should know, 9 p.m. on the closing date is when the contract says you're entitled to keys as a buyer. So anything sooner than that means you did a good job of negotiating and getting them to like you and agree to give it to you after it's been recorded. That's the most common, right? But that's why you want to build rapport and have, an agent, a listing broker like you.
For commercial is 5 p.m.
Right. Paragraph G, Section 1031, like-kind exchanges. If either buyer or seller intends for this transaction to be part of a 1031 exchange, then the other party shall cooperate. 1031 is a tax-deferred exchange. So I got an offer yesterday on my triplex listing, and they are doing a 1031. So the way I explained it to my client was, you need to be aware of it because it does impact you, but it doesn't affect you financially. It just affects you. You have more things to sign, and it can affect the timing. So we just want to be considerate of that and decide, does that work for us? Do we have other offers, or is this the only one? And the way I explained to him was, this is the first offer, so we're going to wait. But if it were the only offer, yeah, we would take it. We would accept it, right? All right. Get out of the way. Closing costs, prorations, and charges. So this just is instructions to the escrow company, but it's authorization by buyer and seller that stuff is going to be prorated through the closing date so that the seller pays it up to the closing date and the buyer pays it thereafter. Sale information. All paragraph I is saying is that both agents can promote the fact that this sale closed in the MLS in their statistics. Paragraph J, seller citizenship and FIRPTA. So this is in reference to specific term number 14 because FIRPTA stands for the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. So, oh look, it's right there. That impacts the escrow company and technically the buyer, the way the code is written. But we're saying we want escrow to handle this. If it's a foreign seller, they have to withhold the tax. Does that make sense? Paragraph K, notices. So this is saying that we're going to use MLS forms for the notices. And then what is the definition of delivery? So let's read that because that's an important one. Notice to buyer must be signed by at least one seller and shall be deemed given only when the notice is received by the buyer, by selling broker, or at the licensed office of the selling broker. That is why we CC the other broker and the other broker's firm. We really technically just have to send it to one of them. But by CCing both and our own firm, we now have third-party corroboration and evidence of when it arrived, when it was delivered. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So always, anytime you're delivering some modification to the agreement or some notice pursuant to the agreement, like a 35R, you're going to CC the other broker, the other broker's firm, and our firm email. Mm-hmm. And those emails are right here. Document email address. Listing firm, document email address.
Do they have to put that on their website? Because sometimes I go to a website and it's like I can't tell which one it is, and I just pick whatever's there, and hopefully that's right.
I have never been to a firm's website. I only use the MLS.
Well, I mean, that's what I meant. I mean, I click on the firm, and then it takes me to
It's always in the MLS, and it's always apparent.
That's it.
It's
okay.
always easy to distinguish.
Okay.
So,
I was wondering if that was the case.
Yeah, you because what you'll see is the when you click on the firm number,
Mhm.
ID number,
Right.
it brings you to the firm's profile, and it'll have the designated broker's contact info and the document email address, which oftentimes are the same, but not always. Okay, so paragraph L, computation of time. This is a really important one, and this is where a lot of agents make mistakes, and it shouldn't be that hard. So I'm going to say it very simply, and then you guys can grill me on it, okay? The short version is any measurement of time starts the day after it's agreed to. Any measurement of time that is 5 days or fewer excludes weekends and holidays. Any measurement of time that's greater than 5 days includes weekends and holidays, but cannot end on a weekend or holiday, in which case it advances to the next business day. That's it. Now, if you're hearing that for the first time, your brain might be spinning, but if you think about it logically, the real differentiator is 5 days or not, 5 days or longer, and starts the day after you make the agreement. And then weekends and holidays all always factor in the same way, so they're not that hard to remember. Any questions on that?
So if it is more than 5 days, include the weekends, right?
Right.
And if it is 5 days and it ends on weekend,
Then it would advance to the first business day. 5 days don't include
Yes.
weekends, so
Yes.
it can never end on a weekend.
yes.
So let's do an example. John writes an offer on my listing, and he puts a 5-day inspection contingency in it, and we reach mutual agreement on Tuesday, right? So it's a 5 days, and we got mutual yesterday.
Mhm.
Today's day 1.
Mhm.
Day 2, day 3, Monday is Memorial Day. So it
does
doesn't
not.
count. So the 31st is day 4. John has to have his inspection response back to me by the 1st.
Okay.
Make sense?
For inspection response, either we are satisfied or we are not satisfied, we have to give notice.
Yep.
If
I mean,
we take silent,
if you don't say anything, it expires.
which means you waived.
It's more professional and thorough to go ahead and send it, because the listing broker would prefer to have it in writing that you let it expire. John, why are you timidly raising your hand?
Well, I was wondering if you were going to say something more.
No, I appreciate it.
Okay. It seems like there's one exception to that in there, which is I've debated with an agent at least once about it.
All right. What's your exception?
It says, except for the possession date. See that?
Yep.
And the way I interpreted that is like, if you say closing plus 3,
Right.
and you closed on Thursday, so let's say you closed on Thursday, so let's say you closed on Wednesday, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
The 3 is less than 5 days, so you don't include the weekends.
I know, but it seems like, because like sometimes you want to, if you want to negotiate possession date on a certain day, say it's plus 3 days. That's why I think it says except for the possession date. See that? It says except for the possession date.
Right. You're except I can read.
Yeah.
But you're stopping at a comma.
Right. I know.
If the last day is a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday as defined, the specified period of time shall expire the next day that is not.
Okay, now I've read this way, and I've won debating with the agent on this, because you're right. It is any of the days. It doesn't include Saturday, Sunday, or legal holidays, just like you explained.
Right.
But if it's a possession date, there's an exception to that. It can be a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday.
Absolutely.
So the rule's still the same.
But you were arguing over two different things.
Okay.
If I say closing plus 3, the +3
Mm.
is held against the 5 days or fewer rule.
Mm. I
If
see what you're saying.
if I say my close date is May 30th,
In possession.
that's where this sentence comes in. It's a specific date. That is a
you can't close
holiday.
on May 30th.
That is a holiday.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right. That's a holiday, right? You can't close on that day.
Right. Right. There's no county courthouse open.
No, you can't close on that day. Cannot. I agree with that.
So how often do you write in closing +3?
Not very often. I mean, it used to be like that, but not,
Good. I mean, I don't. My deals are always either possession upon closing, or I've negotiated some special deal with the seller to stick around because it helped me win. That's it. Closing +3 was customary 10 years ago and back. It was wildly common. It was 99% of deals were closing +3. But we're on a tangent now. You look perplexed.
I'm just trying to think of how this recently happened. Because I gave them a run. I let my client stay for a week, or about 10 days.
Okay.
And it came up on a weird day, anyways. But it doesn't
Your
matter.
client was the seller?
Yes. So it didn't seem to matter that because there's a
So you agreed to a specific date.
Right.
The only thing that's confusing you is because we're talking about the +3. When you agree to a specific date, it doesn't matter where it falls. Right? Remember that line, it's check the box if it's a possession upon closing, or check a box and it's a blank line. So I could say, we're going to close on May 30th, but I want possession to be on June 15th. If June 15th is a Saturday,
you can get it on. You can.
Right.
You can get it on the Saturday.
Say June 18th. Yeah.
That is a Saturday, and that's what we want. And they're saying, no, it can't be on a Saturday or Sunday. No, because of that,
Right.
You can get it on a Saturday or
Right.
Sunday or holiday.
All you have to do is draw their attention to the paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's how you win arguments, right?
Right.
You,
The paragraph.
your client already agreed to it.
Your client already agreed
This
to
is
it.
not an interpretation thing.
Mm-mm.
It says explicitly,
Mhm.
except for the possession date, right?
Right.
You drew the proper emphasis. All right, I'm back on track.
Okay, good.
Paragraph, specific term M, fax and email.
Mm.
This was introduced because people started migrating to faxes and then started migrating to email, and technically and legally neither of those were considered notice unless all parties agreed to it.
Mhm.
So they've integrated that into the agreement.
Mm.
So facsimile transmission of any signed original document and retransmission of any signed facsimile transmission shall be the same as delivery of an original. And then it goes on to say if for some reason escrow or the lender needs a wet signature on something, that all parties agree to do that. So that's not very complicated, and it is a good thing. Integration and electronic signatures. This agreement constitutes the entire understanding between the parties. No modification of this agreement shall be effective unless agreed in writing and signed by both parties. That's why you don't have mutual if they haven't signed everything. Assignment, paragraph O, buyer may not assign unless the seller gives prior written consent. So if I put and or assigns as the buyer's name, that's prior written consent if the seller agrees to it and signs it.
Mhm.
Paragraph P, default. This is the one where I said you're always going to check the box for forfeiture, and here's why. If you check the other box, seller may, at seller's option, A, keep the earnest money as liquidated damages, B, bring suit against the buyer for seller's actual damages. Whew. That could be costly, right? You could have somebody that says, I missed a business opportunity because you failed to close, therefore I lost millions, right? So that's why we would never check that box. Specific term Q, professional advice and attorney's fees. Buyers and seller are advised to seek counsel. Anytime one of your clients says, I kind of want to talk to an attorney, your response needs to be, and you should. If they say, do you think I need to talk to an attorney? You should say, I have lots of clients that close without consulting an attorney, but if you feel uncomfortable, you should talk to an attorney. R, offer. Buyer shall purchase a property on the terms and conditions of this agreement. Seller shall have until 9 p.m. on the offer expiration date to accept this offer unless sooner withdrawn. So that's the impact of putting on there expires at noon or whatever. Acceptance shall not be effective until a signed copy is received by the other party. All right? If it has not been accepted, it'll lapse and the earnest money will be refunded. Paragraph S, counteroffer. Any change in the terms presented other than the insertion of the seller's name and seller's warranty of citizenship, that's paragraph 14, shall be considered a counteroffer. If a party makes a counteroffer, then the other party shall have until 9 p.m. on the counteroffer expiration date to accept the counteroffer unless sooner withdrawn. Acceptance shall not be effective until a signed copy is received by seller, by listing broker, or at the licensed office of listing broker. And if it's not accepted, it'll expire.
So that's why I was wondering about the recording number. It doesn't seem to be included in that. But
I appreciate that you're questioning me. Get it initialed if it makes you uncomfortable.
Okay.
Paragraph T, offer and counteroffer expiration. If no expiration is specified for any counter or any offer/counteroffer, the offer/counteroffer shall expire 2 days after the offer/counteroffer is delivered by the party making the offer/counteroffer, unless sooner withdrawn. So you see up here where it says counteroffer expiration. Well, there is no written field for you to put, here's my counter and it's expiring on this date.
Mm-hmm.
So in most cases, you're just sending a counter without a written expiration, so you're going to be subject to the 2 days.
And that would include weekends and holidays. You could actually quite a long time before it actually expired on a counter.
Right, I'm going to say it so the recording gets it. What John said is that would not include weekends and holidays, so you could actually have much more than 2 days. You're damn right, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I've had agents come to me and say, man, we sent out a counter offer, but it was a while ago, and now we got this new offer, so we're going to negotiate with them. But then when we did the math, their counter offer was still valid.
Right.
So you have to rescind a counter offer if you don't want it accepted.
And you could sign it real fast and get on a contract.
Hell yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, I've kind of done
when
that
you
too.
get a sniff that something might be brewing, you freaking, like here's the most common thing where this comes into play. I get an offer in, we counter offer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then another offer comes in. I'm sorry, we counter, John counters back. We get another offer in that we haven't signed yet, and somehow John gets wind of that. He rescinds his counter back to me and signs the counter that I sent out.
Wow.
We're mutual. And if he does it fast enough, he just cut out this guy. Does that make sense? So be very cognizant of that. And be very aware of when you got something out there that could be accepted, and now you find something better, you need to extinguish that first one or run the risk of having sold it to two different people, which is illegal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Paragraph U, agency disclosure. We've talked about that enough. I think you're going to say buyer represented by the selling office, seller represented by the listing office. Commission. Seller and buyer shall pay a commission in accordance with any listing or commission agreement to which they are a party. Listing firm's commission shall be apportioned between listing firm and selling firm as specified in the listing. You are entitled to the selling office commission that is advertised. Don't let anyone tell you, well, if you want this deal to go, you need to take less. Or say yes to that and then let me know and I'll go get the rest of the money after it closes. That's an MLS violation. We just did it 2 weeks ago with Shrek. He had one. It came through QC. I looked at it. I looked at the listing. I'm like, listing's 3. Why are we at 2.5? Oh, well, we had to make it work. Okay. Let it close. Once it closes, it came back to my desk. I called the designated broker of the other firm. Said, you owe us $1,100. Why? Read paragraph 100, I think it is.
Even, we have addendum and buyer and seller signed?
That's even better, because it explicitly says in the rule that it cannot be in the agreement, in the purchase and sale agreement. Now,
I have one back
could John and I agree to both cut our commissions to make a deal work? Yes, but then you have to have a separate written agreement. It can't be an addendum to the purchase and sale agreement. And I'm not making a training video on how to discount. I refuse to do that. Just know that if you're ever made to feel like you had to discount to make the deal come together, then you're still going to get paid. We're going to collect.
Even you have addendum.
Yeah. 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 All right. Paragraph W, cancellation rights, lead-based paint. If a residential dwelling was built prior to 1978, you guys all know that. You're going to have Form 22J, right? And you have the right to test. I can't remember the last time someone actually did a test. Oh, wait, yes, I can. Paragraph X, this is a biggie. Lots of agents have no idea what this says, and a handful of agents do know what it says, and they will ask you to strike it. The reason is this is a free 10-day contingency if they can find materially inaccurate information. So basically, I can get out of a deal if I find a typo in your listing. A typo, right? That seems so minor.
So what is the material difference? Let's say if
we can, there's thousands of things in the listing. We're not going to go through each and tell you whether they're material or not. I will tell you, if I make a typo on the bedroom count, is the lack of a bedroom material? Absolutely. Right? If I get the square footage wrong, is that material? You betcha. Right? So material means it has an impact on the economics or the value. If I put that you have a filtered view of Mount Rainier, and it's, only between December and February because all the leaves are off the trees, is that material? No, it's still filtered, right? That's subjective. Anyway, now if I'm writing a competitive offer and I want the seller to know that we're really serious, I could do this, right? And strike this. That's me proactively saying, hey, we're not going to invoke this clause to get out of this deal. We want this house.
That's forceful. That's good.
Right?
Yeah, that's leverage.
And that communicates to the other side, not only that I'm being aggressive, but that I am super knowledgeable about contracts. Right? Because most agents don't know what the hell that paragraph says. And here I am not only knowing what it says, but I'm saying we're going to waive this. And we're going to waive the right to revoke on Form 17. We're just going to have a short inspection, and we're only looking for major defects. All the writing winning offer stuff that we coach, that all communicates a serious interest in the home, a lack of desire to find excuses to get out of it, and a really strong and smart agent, right? Paragraph Y, public offering statement. This paragraph only applies if a public offering statement is required by RCW 64.34. That's for a brand new condo. This is one of the main reasons why we have to use Form 28 rather than Form 21. There were some terms on the first page that only applied to condos. There's clauses also in the last 5 pages or last 4 pages about it. And these are all 3 of them right here. Resale cert and condo assessment. So that if they apply, we are going to get these documents. Now I want you to read the resale cert, because you think of the context of paragraph 22D, paragraph 8, the homeowner's documents clause. That clause gives you a finite amount of time, whatever you ask for, and the seller agrees to review documents that are provided if available. At the end of that time frame, it expires. sort of like the inspection clause, right? Resale cert, so this is the reference to line, what is it, 16? Yeah, specific term 16. This paragraph only applies if a public offering statement is not required by RCW 64.34. If buyer has not received a resale cert, seller shall deliver a resale cert to buyer by the date specified in specific term number 16. Buyer shall be conclusively deemed to have approved the resale cert unless, within 5 days following receipt, buyer gives notice of disapproval. If buyer disapproves the resale cert, this agreement shall terminate and the earnest money shall be refunded to buyer. So we have 5 days from when they provide it. What happens if they don't provide it by that date?
You can terminate it.
Our 5 days hasn't even started. So if the seller delivers it to me late, my 5 days starts when he sends it.
I remember where I don't remember where how read it, but I remember there is one term say whichever comes early, but I don't remember which term.
Right, but that it doesn't say that here. But there are lots of clauses where it says that. The inspection, the seller's response to your inspection response, it's when they provide it, you now get 3 days as the buyer. Or if they don't provide it, the day that it was due, whichever happens earlier. So if they have 3 days to give it back to me and they give it to me on day 2, well, now I have 3 days from there. If they have 3 days to give it back to me and they never give it back to me, my 3 days starts when their 3 days ends. But this doesn't say that. So that means they got to provide it and your 5 days starts when they provide it. Any questions before I stop the recording?
So that's why when we are looking for a condominium and when the listing agent realized that your client is really interested, and then they send the resale certificate right away.
Yeah, they want the clock to start ticking.
Right.
That's right. All right. So if you got a bunch of info out of this, awesome. If you want more detail, particularly about pages 2 through 5, please watch the Form 21 training. That is actually a 2-hour-long video, but you'll be able to see me go through each paragraph in great detail. Thanks, and have a great day.
Have you put that meeting for Form 21 on before yet?
Not yet.
Where I can find those reports?